Alrighty, guys, welcome to the Data, Privacy, and Sovereignty in AI Model Building panel. I'm Andy. I am the co-founder of the Rollup. We do a lot of education and media. Check us out on all your favorite socials, etc. Let's jump right in with a quick intro from everybody, and so far, how they're enjoying Cannes.
Yeah, so my name's Ismael. I'm the founder of a company called Lagrange. We focus on the intersection of AI and ZK. We work with a lot of the largest companies in AI, NVIDIA, Intel, many of the Web 2 ones, as well as probably every company in AI x crypto right now. What we do is we effectively sell safety and privacy for AI using zero-knowledge proofs. And I got the Cannes 4 hours ago, so far it's hot and there's traffic.
My name is Bidhan. I'm the founder of Bagel. And what is Bagel? It's a great breakfast food. We all love it. But other than that, at Bagel Labs, what we do is we enable the monetization of open source AI. So we believe that open source models should be built by open source community. But they don't necessarily have the access to resources to be able to do so. So we have to give them a way to monetize their work. And a lot of those, when you go into the implementations, there's a lot of focus on privacy, ZK that we allow for. Happy to talk about that. We happen to be one of the first ever companies to be able to train open source models with zero knowledge verifiability. Happy to talk about that as well later. And since I arrived in Cannes yesterday, I've been just sweating. So that's TLDR for me.
I'm Teana Baker-Taylor. I am the co-founder of Venice AI, which is a private, uncensored, generative AI app that allows you to do text and generate images and interact with characters in a completely private environment, and won't scold you or tell you that it can't answer that. I have been in Cannes since last night. The Italians shut down the airspace, so I got in really late. So I've not seen anything but my hotel, but it's hot, I agree. Not sweaty yet.
Hey guys, this is Ram. I'm one of the core contributors at OpenLedger. OpenLedger is an AI blockchain which enables people to contribute data sets and build specialized AI models, and we reward the data contributors using attribution. That's our core piece, and that's the protocol that was built on. And we focus on enabling more and more open source fine-tuning. So as much as models are good enough in the space right now, but they have to be specialized for actual real-world use cases, and we want to promote that. And it's good to be here and talk more about this. Thank you, guys.
My name is Bailey. I'm one of the co-founders at PrismaX. We're building a base layer to connect robots and humans, teleoperators, data, robot owners, robot users, so that humans and robots can work together rather than people getting replaced by robots. Excited to be here, and I agree with everyone else. Cannes has been a little bit warmer than I've expected.
Awesome, guys. Thanks. All right, so just to start, I would like to just give a bit of a personal anecdote as to my experience using some LLMs over the last 6 to 9 months, pretty much in a day-to-day capacity, whether for personal usage, business usage, etc. And so I would say when I started to interact with LLMs, very, very frequently, I was a little bit hesitant to provide information about myself, my personal, life, my business, photos of people that I interact with, etc. Tell more stories. Over the last 6 to 9 months, I guess I've just become much more. I've been able to provide much more information to LLMs, feeling less stressed out about what AI would know about me or has, in terms of data. All this to kind of get to the point of, I'd like to understand the problem space of privacy right now when using LLMs and understand why this is something that we need to work on and what each of you guys are doing. So perhaps just to understand for the audience right now, when you're using LLMs, what is the level of privacy you have with your data? So when I go and I sign into Claude or ChatGPT, et cetera, and I'm using these with my Google account, entering information, what is the level of privacy that we have now, and why is that problematic, or why do you feel that that's problematic? And
You've got zero doing what you just described. Zero. So it's not the LLM that determines what's private. It's the platform that it's running on. And if you're connecting things like Google, you're bringing a whole bunch of information with you, potentially information that you don't intend to share. So I would be cautious about kind of combining those things. The open source models you can run on your own machines if they're of a size and you are, adept enough to be able to do that. And that's obviously going to be the most private. Using a platform like Venice, we don't store your prompts. We don't store the response. Nothing is held on GPUs. Everything is sent back and forth through a reverse proxy. And our intention, both for you and for us, is that we never had your data, so we don't have to protect it. We don't have to keep it secure. We can't hand it over to a government or, the New York AG when they come and demand it because we never had it in the first place. So a lot of our users, we don't even know who they are. They can connect to Venice with a wallet. They can pay with crypto, and all we know about them is their wallet address. So there are choices, and obviously open source provides a lot more clarity around what you're using and where that data might be going. But for example, like you can use DeepSeek on Venice via our API, and you're using it through the Venice platform. So it's not going back to China, back to DeepSeek. So there are ways that you can use, it's not the LLM that determines the privacy, it's the platform. And the platforms that you describe, the mainstream platforms, are not private. The other thing that I would say, to me, the big privacy problem that we have is that people don't understand why they need privacy. And that feels like a bigger challenge for this group of people, to get people to understand why mainstream AI could be potentially Orwellian and very problematic and not that long from now.
I would disagree a little bit. I think there's a subset of users who really care about the privacy of AI and really care about the privacy of the input data. And I don't know if I'd let those users near a school zone. There's a lot of people who just are afraid of putting in business information, or they're afraid of putting in their photos, but all this stuff's generally online already. And there isn't a very high quotient of privacy surrounding the vast majority of the input information most people are putting into LLMs. Where I think privacy is actually very relevant for the average person is in security conscious settings. Things like healthcare, finance, aerospace defense, places where our entire standard of living is already predicated on a degree of privacy, wherein the use of AI in these settings is not a question of, do I need privacy on this net new application? It is, does this setting that already requires privacy have the ability to still hold the requisite privacy requirements on top of a new technology being added? Which is a substantially different set of assumptions, and it's a much larger market space.
I think technology, just want to add one thing, right? If you take a look at most of the products that we use, they're so useful because they understand how we work, right? It has a personal information of who's Andy and what he likes to browse about, what he likes to talk about, and then it's personalized to your own need. That's why you use X, that's why we use all these social media platforms. So if you're going to make these platforms private and not store any of these information, it's going to be useless, right? I don't think we need to really worry about privacy. We need to worry about how the data is really managed, right? If we can figure out solutions over that, where it's not about you're not saving the prompt or anything like that. I don't believe in that. I think you should really worry about, I still will save the prompt, but how can I keep that private within the organization? Obviously, we cannot trust the centralized parties on this. We're not sure what they're going to do about it. If we can actually build systems which are decentralized, but still efficient enough, then it can be useful, right? We obviously don't work on that. We are more as a platform that will enable people to bring in their data and build models. But we work with parties who enable privacy, like Lagrange, right? We work with them to enable better data privacy. For example, an enterprise who's building on us, it's one of the largest e-commerce players out there. They want to build an AI model with customer data. And all of this is their own proprietary customer data information. They have to feed into the model to make it actually useful for them to use. But if they don't do that, it's going to be a very generic model which users don't have any idea about using it. So it comes down to the measures that we use to make sure that data is still contributed, but it's kept private, and we use measures to like players like privacy preserving players like Lagrange to make it much more efficient. I think that's the way we need to approach this, than not actually saving any of these information.
Let me just be clear that we're not saving any data, but all of your data on Venice is stored in your browser, so it doesn't leave your browser. So what you're describing there is of the interaction that I am having over a consistent period of time with my instance of Venice on my browser. All that information is there, so it does have context.
I think Ram's point's actually very good right there, where a large e-commerce player training a model on customer data has an inherent privacy expectation surrounding that data before the model is trained. And so you need privacy there to maintain the existing expectation. It's not a situation of like some guy who is putting stuff in his LLM that he doesn't want the world to know and is then like super worried that like the New York AG is going to find out. Like, it's a little bit different. And I think the enterprise use cases really are where privacy flourishes.
But the expectation there would just be that whatever e-commerce store, Shopify backend database, that's the same level of privacy that you would expect from something that you buy online. That same data to be used in a model, but just to maintain an equal level of privacy, basically.
Exactly, but now OpenAI doesn't have the aggregate amount of all shopping data across every shopping site that has to plug in. There's still sovereignty of the data within the respective environments.
I'll share a personal incident like related to the privacy and whatever the platforms have information about you, right? So a couple of days ago, or maybe like a week ago, I asked ChatGPT to fill a form for me, right? And of course, like I knew that it knew my name because I put it in the settings, but it also filled in my home address, my phone number, all of that, like very, like, correctly. Like, I was like, how does it know that? So probably in the past, I uploaded some document which had all of those, which I did not know. And it kept that in the memory, and it provided all of this information, which is good for now because it was really convenient for me, right? It filled everything for me. So then I was thinking about that, like there are two sides of the coin. One is the convenience. Like if the LLM has all the information about you, it can do anything for you, right? Your personal assistant, personal agent, or whatever you call it. But on the other side, you don't have any data privacy. Like everything ChatGPT has is open to OpenAI, right? Even recently, OpenAI got a court order that they cannot delete the user information even if they wanted to, right? And we feel like at Bagel, we feel there's a middle ground. The LLMs can be customized. It can work as your personal assistant while preserving your privacy. How do you do that? We recently released a research paper which also got highlighted in one of the biggest machine learning conferences in the world. It's called ICML. If anyone is going there next month, that paper is called ZK LoRa. It's called like a zero knowledge proof for contributing some parameters to a model. That happens to be the first ever paper that got published in that conference, which has zero knowledge in the title of it, like ever. But anyway, going back to like what does it mean? That means that kind of technology allows a contributor to contribute some amount of data about themselves, but the central server does not get the data. It gets a ZK proof of the data, like if it fits in, if the contribution was made correctly. And after that, we allow for like a multi-party computation from the both contributor and the central server, where the LLM can work as a personal agent. It has all the customization, all the information it needs about you, but at the same time, you own your data. You don't necessarily have to reveal the parameters or the raw data to anyone else. So definitely there's a middle ground. It's hard going to the middle ground, like solving that problem. Because, like zero knowledge proofs, like you'd probably know, like super slow for this kind of use cases most of the time. Like if you're training a model in a way, we have figured out some of those solutions. So if anyone is interested, look up ZK LoRa. It's online. It's probably one of the most, or first ever scalable solution for this kind of problems.
It's an easy KL fork, right?
It is not actually. So let's get into what Ezekiel is, right? So Ezekiel converts a model into the ONNX format, right? So we used Ezekiel for that, converting the model into ONNX format. But the whole zero knowledge generation or communication, there's, I love those guys, like they're great. We work with them. But Ezekiel wasn't used in any of the actual communication. It was just used for converting.
But all the cryptography is just theirs, right?
It's not, no.
Interesting.
Anyway, so that's my 2 cents, like why it's important. We have to find a middle ground, even if it's hard.
Bailey, anything to add?
Yeah. It's so, in terms of something like emergent behavior that the model knows things you've entered in the past, I would say that's no different from a non-AI platform like Gmail, which obviously has access to every email you've ever sent. The difference being that this knowledge is being exposed to you more as a user-facing feature, and it's uncanny. It's uncanny to be reminded that the cloud platform knows all this about you, and it stresses people out. I think the real difference, as a lot of people have alluded to, is training on the user data and all of the privacy implications that come from that. In particular, early on, there were a lot of worries that the trained models could be coerced to go leak private user data that had been accidentally uploaded, right? If you have a model help you fill out a form, there might be something that you really don't want to get trained on. And it's still, I think, an open field of research how much of the RLHF can be bypassed to force these models to regurgitate their training data. There have been some POCs saying that that's possible. But either way, I'd say the real thing is to be able to have the option to get trained on or not get trained on. Right now, OpenAI doesn't give you that choice because it is very important that they train on your data, and a lot of the other platforms are too. But giving users the option to say, hey, I want to contribute, I want to maybe earn from this is important, or saying, no, I absolutely don't want training because that's my data, that was very sensitive.
So you guys are doing a lot of stuff in the physical world. How do you think about privacy in the physical world when it comes to humanoids and AR and VR versus what we're talking about here?
I think for the physical world, it's 100% imperative that all the training end up being opt-in, because it's not just yourself, right? It's the people around you that are being captured when this training data is getting captured, and being able for humans and communities to make a decision and get compensated for it, I think is going to be a really important part of how this type of training moves forwards. You see a little bit of that already, but by and large, a lot of the training for the robots, especially in countries that are less sensitive about privacy, is by pulling things like security camera footage. And I don't think that's a world that a lot of us want to live in, where everything you do is captured and used to go train these AI models that might cause a lot of troubles in the future.
So if we think about the entire totality of AI as this kind of abstract intelligence, super intelligence that many people around the world contribute to day in and day out, we see that 99% of that activity is happening within basically technocorp owned AI models, AI platforms, etc. You guys are here wanting to push this idea around decentralizing a lot of parts of AI. I'm curious what you guys believe are specific parts of the current AI stack which are most ripe to actually have adoption of decentralized tooling rather than just using the current counterpart from the techno corps, ChatGPT, OpenAI, Anthropic, etc., and kind of why these specific points of this stack you believe are most ripe for actual adoption, not just for the sake of decentralization, not just for the sake of marketing, but with a real kind of way to wedge yourself in. Ram, maybe you can start with that.
So I think we're at a point where you hear me well? Yeah, we're at a point where there is a lot of need for data, right? But 2 years back there was always this need for compute, right? That's when most of these compute companies came about. We really subsidized the cost to compute by providing decentralized compute providers. But there is a need for large amount of data right now, especially because all the LLMs have reached to a point where they've consumed, we all know this, right? They've consumed all internet data. And they're all going towards proprietary data sets because all these LLMs have to have more knowledge about real world use cases. But I think it's not possible to actually have a centralized way to consume pretty much every data that is there. The only way to do that is actually have a very natural decentralized way for people to contribute these data sets. For example, if someone wants to build a model for a particular language, let's say Korean language, right? I was in South Korea, and there's a huge need for an actual real live translation tools, which because everyone just speaks Korean there. And most of the models that you see today are very westernized, right? They're built by companies on the West. So they don't really understand the culture and the emotions and stuff like that that's happening in that particular region. So what if you can build a model for that? The best way to do that is to have people who speak the Korean language contribute for that, right? Someone who's sitting on the West, if he wants to build that model, he cannot have people sitting on the West to contribute that. He needs to have people on the Asia side to actually go ahead and contribute. So the best way to collect data is to have the most decentralized and open network for people to go ahead and contribute something. And the only way they would actually do that is they're incentivized, right? And if you bring in a centralized platform to do that, there are so many red tapes that you need to pass on if you want to incentivize people. That's why Hugging Face fails, right? Hugging Face now is a platform where just people bring in data, and which is their own data, and try to train models. It was like YouTube pre-monetization. Like once you start monetizing these marketplaces, that's where you can actually bring in real quality, high quality data sets, and you'd also have enterprises coming forward and contributing. And the only way you can do that is to use crypto as a mechanism to reward, because that means that you can reward pretty much everyone from anywhere. Right? That's what we want to enable. What if Hugging Face was much more open, decentralized, and rewarding? That's what you see in OpenLedger. And we've already seen that happen. There are a lot of unique use cases, like the Korean model I spoke about. There is a team which is building a model around sleep data, where they need data sets from various races in various parts of the world. And only way that you can do that is to incentivize people across the globe. Right? So I think we've come to a point where there is a need of lot of data. There's a need for a lot of data. And there's a lot of need for like specialized models, which are very unique. And you can't just do that by using centralized platforms. You need to have platforms that are open and having anyone to contribute. And they have the power to contribute. They know that they're going to get paid for it. Only then they will come forward.
I like that thesis a lot. I would also add, the majority of the internet is a decentralized data set, but it is a public decentralized data set, right? The contribution of creating a website that is search indexable is a permissionless process by and large. But there are certain data sets that you want to permissionlessly have contribution for, that you want to have differential privacy over. And I think that's actually a very, very interesting use case that OpenLedger is very uniquely positioned towards. But I would broadly say, back to your original question on what parts of AI should be decentralized, I think you have to look at it with a lot of caution. There's a lot of places where you don't really need to decentralize things in AI. I don't think you need to decentralize AI compute very broadly. I think that's a little bit of a cool mechanism to launch a token more than it is an actual business. You arguably don't need to decentralize the training of a lot of these models. You don't really need to host them in a decentralized inference platform, I would argue. It would be good to have verifiability, but you can get cryptographic guarantees over that. You don't really need strong liveness guarantees over most places that these models are being used. So I'd say there's a lot of smoke and mirrors that people are throwing up over like where in crypto XAI they want to decentralize things. And a lot of these use cases are just, how do I justify another token at like the nth component of the stack? But there are places where it does matter. I think it matters for the creation of cryptographic guarantees. It matters for how you want to source and handle the origination of decentralized data. And there's other two that I can't think of right now that are also very logical. Protocols like Grass, I think, very logically use a token.
Yeah, I'm going to answer a different question, slightly different here, is where we can use decentralization. Like, that's the question, right? But I'm going to answer how we can use decentralization. Like, we've been talking about, like, yeah, we're going to decentralize everything, but the decentralization does not work, especially in an adversarial scenario when you have a decentralized network and some North Korea is trying to attack your network. You basically have to have 100% verifiability guarantee of everything that's happening within your network. And that's one of the unique things you can enable with using cryptography. Because, like, let's say there's a network, which whatever it's doing, it's a data network or it's a training network, but then an attacker can come in and they can poison the data that's available within the network, or whatever, poison the weights if the model is being trained. That's why you need the verifiability. Otherwise, whatever model is being developed with those resources are going to be accessible, will have a backdoor for the North Korean hacker group and whatnot. So verifiability is important. And I might sound like a broken record, but yeah, like that's one of the problems we have solved. There's a long way to go, but we have showed like one of the very early signs that this is possible. And this is not just within us, this is not just within the crypto community. The mainstream machine learning community is accepting that. They're highlighting our work within their conferences and whatnot. And that's also how you get the adoption of those kind of technology. You build it within cryptography, but you show it within the mainstream machine learning community so that they can understand what are the doors you can unlock with it.
I think everyone here is sort of saying data, but really to me, it's data at scale. I think the internet analogy makes a lot of sense. The internet was decentralized. There was no the internet company that went and told everyone what to do. There was motivation from everyone around to go post things they enjoyed or posting that made money, and it ended up being a really good slice of knowledge to train these models. And I think the same is going to be true for a lot of the other more data deficient modalities. Like we work in a very data deficient modality where there's really only about 20,000 hours of available training data. So there's a really good opportunity here for decentralization to just become the de facto standard. And otherwise, I think decentralized training is very interesting. I wouldn't call it like a practical solution, but I think it's interesting because you can build a model which knows a lot but doesn't have a like centralized legal target, right? A lot of the reason why these big model companies will censor or restrict their models is because they are big legal targets. They're worth tens of billions of dollars. If you can diffuse the target or make it so that the people who help do the training are anonymous, then the target goes away and you could potentially build models that are interesting in other ways and have a lot of customers that the current models can't serve.
All right, guys, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much. Let's give it a round of applause, please. Thank you, guys.